What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. And this is a special episode. We're going to dive into the Bills' offensive roster a little bit from a fantasy perspective. This was going to be a season preview a couple of weeks ago, but I'm actually glad the way things worked out with our today's guest because we have a 2-game sample size to maybe compare some of the offseason expectations for this offense with what it's looked like early on and maybe project it over the next couple of weeks. Ian Hartitz, kind enough to join us today. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, man. Maybe not as good as your 2-0 Bills, but, we push on. But, yeah, man, no, it's great to already be 2 weeks into the year. Now it's just a matter of trying to, find that difference between, okay, forgetting everything we thought we knew in the preseason and also understanding, it only has been 2 weeks out here.
You can find all of Ian's work over at Fantasy Life, over on X as well, delivering the goods every single week. And, I want to take a 30,000-foot view of this Bills offense and start with James Cook, who I think is the most intriguing player in the offense. And, we spent so much of the offseason talking about the potential contract extension and what that all looked like and whether or not projecting past this season, if Cook was even going to be on the roster. Now that he's in place and he's come out of the gates, I think he's on pace for 25 touchdowns this season after the first 2 games. I don't know if he's going to keep up that pace, but you were a little bit hesitant to buy in on his 2024 production. And I think that's wise considering what we saw the 2 years prior. How did you go into this season on Cook, and what maybe has changed, if at all, your expectations seeing what he's been able to do in the first 2 games?
Yeah, and look, the only thing, it wasn't against anything that Cook brings to the table as a football player. He's obviously fantastic. For my money's worth, he looked like the best player on the field during that AFC Championship last season. It was just like, man, from 2022 to 2023, we're talking about a guy who converted 2.3% of his touches into touchdowns, and then in 2024, it was up at 7.5%. And just historically, when we see spikes that big, it usually does come back down to earth the following year. But through 2 weeks of this season, man, not really. And the Bills have also started just to give him a bigger general weekly workload, which makes sense when you decide to pay the guy a lot more money out there on a week-by-week basis. So obviously Josh Allen's still getting his near the goal line, but hey, when you're an offense that is going to be spending so much time in the red zone in the first place, honestly, there has been enough meat for really both these guys to eat, again, that close to the goal line. So Josh Allen, number 1 in the NFL with 5 carries inside the 5-yard line, but tied for third, man, is James Cook alongside guys like James Conner, Jalen Hurts, and David Montgomery. So the receiving part of his game, I still feel like is a little bit underutilized compared to what he can do. I know he's made a bad habit of dropping those wheel routes that could have been touchdowns over the years. So and Ty Johnson's great. So I'm not even saying that, the Bills should be doing anything different on offense, but that's really the crazy part here is, Cook, again, as great as he was in fantasy last year, he had like 30 or 35 fewer opportunities with the football than he did in even 2023. So now if we're going to continue seeing, again, that elite high-end efficiency with a more fantasy-friendly weekly workload, he's the RB1 in fantasy through 2 weeks, man. Who's to say he can't keep it going?
Yeah, if you look at him in the passing game, I think it's interesting because he obviously took quite a bit less in the passing game in terms of target share last season, finishing with only 38. And I think I don't think the Bills would ever admit this, but I do think that came from the struggles with some of those easy plays. You mentioned the wheel routes. He's just had like critical drops at critical stages of games early in his career. But it's funny because they drafted him almost more so because of his ability in the passing game back in 2022 than they did for him as like a bell cow every down back. And I don't think he's ever going to be a 70-80% of the snaps running back. I think that there's more room to grow in that department. I think he's improving as a blocker. I think that's something year over year we're going to see from him. But do you think that I think right through 2 games, he's on pace for about the same amount of targets he had 2 years ago. Does that place him in a different tier for you if he's getting 50 to 60 targets in the passing game on top of what he's already doing in the run game?
Yeah, look, the only guys that we're really going to be ranking ahead of him are the dudes that just have the every down role also in good offenses, okay? We can feel a bit more confident about Derrick Henry. Maybe last week's a bad example, but getting those 20, 25 touches a little bit more often than Mr. Cook, Saquon, Bijan, Christian McCaffrey. Again, going into this week, we do have James Cook as a consensus top 8 running back there in the old fantasy life rank. So, again, at that point, it becomes this whole thing like, oh, well, should he be ranked number 4? Should he be ranked number 7? And at the end of the day, you're starting him in lineups of all shapes and sizes. So again, as we're seeing, the ceiling is as high as anyone out there. It really is a situation of like, could he actually be even more? So it was kind of killing me in week one. He had that just ridiculous, like 50-yard catch and run, and Chris Collinsworth too. I do think generally does a good job, and it's such a hard job and everything. So I'm not trying to hate on the guy, but he was like, man, that is just all Josh Allen right there. And I was like, you know what? As great as Josh Allen is, I think maybe a little bit of that had to do with James Cook. But again, I think the other factor is just Ty Johnson, who last year led the NFL in yards per touch. Obviously, Ray Davis has largely, I think, made the most out of his opportunities as well. So in fantasy land, us stupid, selfish nerds always want our running backs to get all the touches. And that's just not realistic in the course of a true, 17-game NFL season. So Bills are doing their thing. James Cook is making the most out of his opportunities. If you drafted him, good freaking job.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ray Davis and Ty. Ray Davis specifically, I felt like a little bit of concern in the fan base over the course of the last month. I mean, I've been getting questions on our insider text line about what's going on with Ray Davis. Like, do you feel like he's like lost a little bit of his juice as a runner? He's only averaging 2.6 per carry, down from 4 a season ago. And I mean, early last season when Cook missed the game, I mean, against the Jets, we just went back and watched that game. Ray Davis was awesome in that game. So I think what's happening right now is just like lack of opportunities more than anything else. I mean, 10 carries in 2 games for a young running back, it's hard to get momentum going. I would say my concern level is still very low for Ray Davis, but he was somebody that you know, depending on the contract situation, were excited to see what maybe he can get with a bigger load. I don't know if the Bills are eager to take away red zone runs for James Cook because he's been so good in that area. But I was with you. I wanted to see a little bit more workload for Ray Davis this season, but I don't know if we're on track for that.
In Ray's defense as well, I mean, 4 of his still small sample size 10 carries came in pure mop-up time with, Trubisky under center there in the end of that Jets game. So, again, it is just 2 weeks. Numbers can look a little bit wonky there. I don't think he's necessarily become a worse version of himself. It is honestly surprising, though. Like, I hear he hasn't busted the big run when the big storyline that I've heard is he actually dropped like 10 or 12 pounds relative to last year, and I hope to get more explosive. So I think we will see that come out in a bigger sample size. But, yeah, man, before I got on here, I was actually writing up just kind of 6 handcuff running backs that are available in more people's leagues than not. And Ray Davis did make the cuts though. I mean, only 17% rostered in ESPN, 24% in Yahoo. I don't think it'd be a situation where we can just cross off Cook's name as a top 10 running back and put Ray Davis in there if he misses time. But man, I do think you would struggle to rank more than 13, 14 guys ahead of Ray. God forbid anything does sideline James Cook. So really, again, it was that one game we had last year, I believe, also against the Jets. And man, Davis 23 of 27 of the backfield carries and targets. Ty Johnson got the start, even ripped off a good first run, and they just went right back to Ray. So again, it wouldn't be quite the every down handcuff role that maybe we see from guys like Zach Charbonnet, even a Tyler Algier in Atlanta, but he is out there on more waiver wires than not. And I cannot recommend enough people, if you have a second quarterback behind someone like a Josh Allen or Lamar, who, let's face it, you're never going to use, God forbid, a second DST or a kicker or a tight end or something like that as well. You're so much better off stashing up your bench with these guys like Ray Davis, Blake Corum, Najee Harris, Woody Marks, among others, because again, those are dudes who are legit one injury away from being on the cover of every single waiver wire article in the industry.
Before we get going here on our next topic, we got to take a quick break, give you a word from our sponsors. We're brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, it's the rush to the Tops Red Zone. Win the greatest of all tailgates in the Tops Red Zone raffle right now. Shop over 25 fan favorite brands like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. You can win a package that includes a Samsung outdoor TV and so much more. Visit topsmarkets.com/redzone for more details. We're also brought to you by Amtrak. Amtrak's Empire Service offers frequent departures daily from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, all the way to New York City. No middle seats, plenty of legroom, free Wi-Fi, and no baggage fees. Riding Amtrak is an experience, a fun and relaxing way to get to your destination. All right, let's go to the tight end room here with the Bills because, man, it seems like we have been year after year waiting for the Dalton Kincaid breakout season. And for as much as people have been, I don't know, down on him in the fan base and beyond, bus gets kind of thrown around a lot when you don't see the kind of top end production from a first round draft pick. But you through 2 games and you're sitting here and everybody eats Joe Brady offense and Dalton Kincaid sitting there at 4th in overall targets in a room without any necessarily bona fide number 1 wide receivers. Where are you at in Dalton Kincaid? Not just with his upside in 2025, but also like where he seems to be in the pecking order of this offense.
You said it, man. Everybody eats to the extent that, man, we're getting Tyrell Shavers and Elijah Moore out there doing their thing last week. How about those backflips from Eli, too, in the victory formation? That is one athletic dude out there, man. So with Kincaid, though, it looked like, man, based on that first drive, it was like, okay, maybe we are going to see him really start to live up to some of that first round hype. But here we are sitting through 2 weeks. And at the end of the day, man, it's just tough to score a bunch of fantasy points when you're not going to be given that full-time role. So there's a 60% route rate for Kincaid. Dawson Knox still hanging around there at 45%, which makes sense. They paid Dawson Knox as much as we want these, quote unquote, in fantasy land. Not that there's anything wrong with Dawson as a real life football player, but these annoying veterans to go away. You got to give them credit, particularly when they are, again, tied into such a big deal. We're seeing that right now in Chicago with Cole Kmet, keeping first round rookie, Colson Loveland really tied to that bench far more than all of us fantasy nerds would love to see. So with Kincaid, man, it was one of those things last year. We're kind of looking at his numbers. It felt weird to try to besmirk Josh Allen at all because for obviously any of our money's worth, he is a top 3, if not top 2, if not top 1 quarterback in the entire NFL. But it was like everything Kincaid was doing underlying looked good. He was second in targets per route run. His yards per route run numbers were good. But once you got to his passer rating when targeted, that's when it fell off a cliff. And you start digging into that and you go, why is that the case? And there really was a high percentage of uncatchable targets thrown his way last year. Maybe not the last one of the season. That was incredibly unfortunate. I totally get it. But, you throw in a couple injuries there. And I do think we just need to maybe pump the brakes a little bit on these younger tight ends really breaking through in meaningful ways. Yeah, it's awesome when Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta managed to do it, but historically it is a position that takes a little bit longer to get going than the other ones. So was hoping it was going to be this year, but again, as long as they are rotating these guys with Dawson Knox, I just think there's always going to be a bit of a counting number ceiling on Kincaid. So all that, just again, kind of number stuff aside though, I will say it's concerning to me that through 3 years now, I mean, for me, my first highlight I think of was the time he pointed at the couple of Lions defenders on the ground after making that catch, which was cool and everything. That was a fun time, but just, it's not like I've been watching these Bills games also going like, oh man, this Dalton Kincaid guy, like, why is he not getting 12 targets per game? Good, solid player. And it's good to have good, solid players across your offense, but I also don't think he's necessarily someone that's necessarily should or, is demanding that he become the focal point.
One of the more intriguing parts of like the offensive evolution this season to me is the introduction of 13 personnel, which the Bills have just not used a ton over the course of Brady, Dorsey, even going back to Brian Dable. And this year with the addition of Jackson Hawes, it changes the math a little bit. And I think to me, that is the package that could potentially unlock Dalton Kincaid at another level in the passing game. You think about the production that we've seen, it hasn't blown you away, but Isaiah Likely in Baltimore, Mark Andrews for a lot of those years in Baltimore, like that's really made it challenging when you can, you have such a good run game, that threat, and then getting those guys out in space. You mentioned Dawson Knox as a pass catcher, and even Hawes with that big play against the Baltimore Ravens going 29 yards down the middle of the field. That's an area where I think if they can unlock that package and find an area to exploit the defense with Kincaid, because I think he can be a matchup problem. Yeah. That to me is when he can maybe take the next step, but they're still kind of working through that a little bit.
I think you're spot on, man. I always go back to kind of what the Patriots were doing, not even all the way back to the Gronk Hernandez days. That's always the real trendy, 2 tight end situation to bring up. But even past that, the kind of Gronk and Martellus Bennett years that they have, where there was a stretch, man, where they would literally get inside the 5-yard line, come out in this goal line jumbo look. And yeah, as a defense, you have to match that with personnel. And then all of a sudden, Brady gets to the line, claps his hand. Then you have Gronk and Bennett basically spreading out and working as wide receivers. And now you got a linebacker and undersized safety against Rob freaking Gronkowski. So again, in no way, shape, or form do I think that Kincaid is necessarily, someone we can consider in the same stratosphere as Gronk. But no, man, I'm with you. The more you can kind of play around with those personnel groupings, the better. I just hope I don't take my guy Keon Coleman off the field too often, because love what I see from this dude so far. I think he's made some big strides in year 2. I just worry, again, based on that week 1 to week 2 and everything we've seen in the post-Stephon Diggs build, that there will truly be enough targets on a weekly basis for him to consistently put up numbers.
That's my next guy I want to talk about here is Keon Coleman, leading the Bills with 14 targets, 11 catches, only 1 drop through the first 2 weeks. Take me into your thought process on Keon, because I think he's one of the more polarizing young players at any position in the league. I mean, there is a wide range of takes this offseason on what he can be in this offense. Obviously, some of the issues from a separation perspective based on the advanced analytics, but inside the building, there is this a level of belief in what he's able to do. And I thought really showed well for himself in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens. Not as much a part of things. I didn't think the passing game was super fluid in week 2. But what do you think the ceiling is for Keon Coleman in year 2?
I think it's as this upside wide receiver too that we kind of wanted Gabe Davis to be over the course of these years. Obviously, playoff Gabe Davis, if that could have been the guy, during the regular season, that would have been a whole different story. But that's really what I believe is on the table for Keon. It's as Josh Allen's primary deep ball and also red zone threat. And it's why he ended up being one of my most drafted wide receivers of the offseason, because we were able to get that, guys, outside the top 50 players at the position in more drafts than not. So with Keon, yeah, he wasn't great as a rookie in terms of just demanding all these targets. Obviously a crowded offense, and then also the separation, as you mentioned. But man, how many 21-year-olds are even in a position to be playing for the Bills offense, and how many of them are still in college or just a backup in the first place? So I do kind of get tired of people just assuming that these, again, 21 and 22-year-olds like aren't allowed to get better as they continue to grow. And Keon, in Keon's case particularly, like he was always drafted as someone that was going to be a bit more of a toolsy project than, the Lab McConkeys of the world. So I get it. I would rather the Bills have Lab McConkey at this point as well. And that continues to not look great and everything. But with Keon, I thought last year we saw 2 elite traits, all right? That ability to go up and get it in contested situations. I mean, we've already seen that from Josh Allen again this year with some of the 2-point conversion fades, the off-script moments where he just says, F it, Keon's down there somewhere. Love that trait of him. We've seen that even going back to his days at Florida State. But also the work after the catch, man. I mean, just what he was able to do last season. He finished number 1 in next-gen stats, yards after the catch, over expected per reception out there. So dude really is a great athlete. And man, I mean, he put, Jair Alexander in the dirt on that ultimate, kind of setting up the game-winning field goal in week 1. It's a shame that he didn't, keep going, just really got shoestring there at the end. So for me, I saw Keon Coleman again as the likely number 1 downfield target earner, which he was last year. He probably will be again this year, and red zone option, which he was, I think, right up there with Kincaid last season, despite missing all those games, and an offense led by arguably the best quarterback on the planet. So yeah, it is a situation where it'd be cool if he separate a little bit more. But at the same time, man, some of those stats, they don't do a good enough job incorporating the reality that, hey, he's running slants and goes and routes that aren't exactly, giving him the best chance to separate in the first place. So some of that stuff too, man, like I appreciate any site that is going out there and trying to quantify what we see. Separation is something that obviously is very difficult to do. I know like Next Gen and some of these sites, they only do it on like where you catch the ball relative to where the defender is by you. So you see these like random tight ends leading the league because, no one pays attention to them. They're on the line of scrimmage, they're 10 yards away. That's not separation. But there's also stuff, and I think Fantasy Points probably does it better than everyone. And yeah, Keon doesn't have great scores, but they also have this, one thing I was seeing people throwing around in Keon where it was like route win rate. It was like percentage of routes where they're winning. And he had a 0% after week 1. And I'm like, well, how is this 0%? I just watched him beat Jair on a skinny post for 30 yards. And they're like, well, because it was cover 0 and he had to play deep. And so we're not actually counting it as a win. And I'm like, all right, guys, like, again, I like the effort here, but it's still going to be a subjective stat at the end of the day. And you know what? It's not like a stat that you necessarily need to be elite in if you do have other elite traits, which I think Keon does. So long story short, I do think he is someone where, yeah, more likely than not, probably ends up more so as a boomer bust wide receiver 3 in an offense that is so good that they don't usually need to keep their foot on the gas and throw the ball 45 times a game. But really encouraging steps, I would say, for a young player that seems to be getting better.
Man, this has been awesome stuff. Some really good Keon Coleman analysis there. I think Bills fans are going to enjoy it. Let everybody know where they can find your work, anything you got cooking this week, early in the season, so Bills fans can get over to your content.
Oh, man, no, I appreciate it. I actually talk a good amount on Bills local radio and stuff with Mike Shope and some of those guys. So appreciate you guys. Again, my Super Bowl pick this year is Bills over 49ers. So I'm pulling for you. And now if you guys don't get it again, feel free to blame me for that jinx right there. But no, man, it's good chopping up with you. I'm over at Fantasy Life. Again, we're just kind of trying to be your one-stop shop for all things fantasy football, get you those championships, maybe have a little bit of fun along the way. The Fantasy Life show on YouTube, podcast, all that jazz. We go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Sunday night. Again, breaking down pretty much everything. Twitter, Hartitz, if you're into that thing as well. But fun talking to you, man.
Great talking to you. And for everybody watching, shout, enjoy your weekend. You can watch some stress-free football on a Sunday with the Bills playing on Thursday Night Football. We'll be back next week